Hey everybody, and welcome to Sensation and Perception. My name is Dr. Daniel, but you can call me Alex. I'm going to be your professor this semester in Sensation and Perception, Psych 359. Now, I said this semester, but technically it's kind of an abbreviated semester, right? Because we're talking about the summer. So really, we only have 6 weeks to do this stuff. And so, on one hand, it's really exciting, right? That basically you can get 3 credit hours for just 6 weeks of work, where normally it takes 15 weeks. It's really exciting. But on the other hand, basically what I'm doing is I'm taking everything that we would normally be talking about in that 15-week span, and cramming it all together into a 6-week course. So basically, you're going to be covering the exact same content. It's just kind of packaged in a little bit of a different way to accommodate for the speed and the shortness of this class. So it's good and it's bad, right? It's short, but it's intense. Okay, so far, if you've been looking at the screen, you may notice something kind of strange, right? That even though this is a video, what you're looking at is a single perfectly stationary still image. And if you don't believe me, you can pause this video and look again at the image. You'll find that it kind of moves before your eyes, right? This is an optical illusion. This is just one of many that we're going to see this semester. This particular one, I like a lot, not only because it is very consistently effective, even if you know that it is an illusion, it still works, but also it was the album cover for a very popular indie rock album from like 9 years ago. You can Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyways, what we're going to be talking about in this video is basically giving you a very broad overview of the course. So I'm going to basically show you what the course is, what it's about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my expectations going into this class and what you can expect out of me. And then probably the most important thing is going to be the grading breakdown. So what assignments do you need to do? What do you need to do to make an A? How am I going to be grading you? Things like that. And then finally, at the very end, I'm going to go through a very quick rundown of what's going to be the very first week of our class here. So I'll take us out of this PowerPoint and look through Plato. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep this stuff short, just because I know that we only have 6 weeks. So what I want you to do is focus right here on this cross right here in the middle, and what you'll see is that all of these celebrities basically from 10 years ago, these were the biggest celebrities of the time, but you'll see that their faces seem to be distorted, right? If we're looking straight there at the cross, their faces seem to be very strange. Now, if you were to look to the left or look to the right, you'll find that all of their faces look perfectly normal. They all look like normal, mid-2000s celebrities' faces. But whenever you don't look there, their faces look distorted. Why is that? That's one of the things that we'll be talking about in Chapter 4 when we talk about face perception. Another very quick illusion, and one that I know that many of you have seen before, is the quote-unquote gold dress, or the blue and black dress. This is a very popular optical illusion that we'll be talking a good bit about in Chapter 5. And so those of you that aren't familiar with this, basically there are 2 camps. There are 2 different kinds of people. One group of people who see this as a blue and black dress, and another group of people who see this as a white and gold dress. And the proportions there are about 66 to 34 in terms, 2/3 versus 1/3 society. See it one color versus the other. But the cool thing about it is that the people that see it as blue and black are absolutely convinced that it's blue and black, and the people that see it as white and gold are absolutely convinced that it is white and gold. So we'll talk about why that is in that chapter, which is Chapter 5, which is about color. And here, we'll also be talking about this in Chapter 5. What I want you to do is to focus your eyes right here on this little pinpoint, and in about 30 seconds, I'll move on to the next slide. So just let your eyes soak in those colors before you. And while we're doing that, I will go ahead and tell you about how right now my audio is not very good. And that's because basically, a long story short, I took apart my laptop because I thought I knew what I was doing. It's got a bad fan, and I tried to replace it, and I was able to replace it. But when I put the laptop back together, for some reason my audio jack doesn't work anymore, which is kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm using these Bluetooth, headsets, and the sound isn't really as good as the kind of professional grade microphone that I used to use. Alright, so now your eyes have soaked in all of this information. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move it over to a white backdrop now. And when I move it over to a white backdrop, you should see an after image. It looks like those colors have been burned into your retina. But the cool thing is that you don't just see cyan, black, and yellow, right? You see red, white, and blue. And so in Chapter 5, we'll talk exactly about why that is that we see things that way. So, a little bit about what this course is. It's right there in the title. However, not everybody knows what sensation is, and not everybody knows what perception is. And so, usually, whenever I have this as like an in-person class, I usually ask people, you know, uh, what do you think sensation is? What do you think perception is? How are they different? Things like that. Generally speaking, and this is going to be a very, very kind of simplified version. We'll talk more about it in Chapter 1. But sensation is going to be everything that leads up to the brain, and then everything that takes place in the brain is going to be perception. So, for example, if I prick my finger, if I were to cut it or something like that, the sensation of that would be of pain as it travels from my pinky up my arm, up the spinal column, up to the base of the brainstem, and then once it starts really making connections there, then it turns into the perception of pain. So, in the coming chapters, when we talk about vision, basically sensation is going to be what the eye is detecting. Perception is going to be what the brain makes of that detection. Another way to think about it is that sensation is detection and perception is interpretation. And we'll go over more of those things in Chapter 1. So some of the kinds of questions that we're going to be looking at in this class are how our eyes are able to see things in front of us. So how is it that our eyes work? This is going to be a huge part of our semester. It's going to take basically half of it. The first 2 exams out of 4 are going to be about vision. We're going to talk about how our ears are able to detect tiny vibrations in the air. In other words, how we are able to detect sound. We're going to talk about how we get car sick. We'll talk about that in Chapter 12. We'll talk a little bit about how we know that a touch is okay versus a touch is painful. So why is it that you can stick your hand on the surface of a stove, and whenever the stove is cold, we don't really have a reaction to it whenever it's hot. We interpret it completely differently. Why is that? We'll talk a little bit about how we're able to detect differences in the air from different chemicals. So we'll talk about smell. That's in Chapter 14. And we'll talk a lot about how our tongues are able to tell us how nutritious a piece of food is, or how non-nutritious a piece of food is. And we'll get into that in Chapter 15 at the very, very end. And we'll also be talking about signal detection theory. This is kind of a framework for thinking about data and thinking about information that we're going to come back to a lot throughout the semester. We'll knock this out in Chapter 1, but it is one of the things that's kind of like a key issue in this class. All right, so sometimes some of the feedback that I get from this class is that it doesn't always feel like psychology. And whenever I get that feedback, I usually say, well, what does it feel like? And usually people will tell me that it feels like biology or it feels like anatomy. Sometimes I hear people say it feels like physics, and I hear people say that it feels like chemistry. In other words, they say it, quote unquote, feels like hard science, And so all that stuff is true. We are going to be incorporating a lot of those things into our discussions of sensation and perception. A lot of that stuff we need to know in order to understand how the eye works or how the tongue works. But I'm going to do my best to continually kind of try to connect this stuff to the real world. Talk a little bit about big general behavior instead of just what happens at a microscopic level. All right, so our textbook, you may have gotten an email earlier, a week or 2 ago about this textbook. This is the one that the university bookstore has on file. It is appropriately called Sensation and Perception. A couple of things about this, though. On one hand, it is written by Jeremy Wolf and basically his friends, his colleagues. And Jeremy Wolf is a guy who is very, very popular and kind of a world-renowned visual scientist. And one of the things that I really like about this textbook is that it really is written by some of the biggest names in the field. So, for example, the vision chapters are written by basically, some of the world's best visual psychologists. The taste chapter is written by one of the world's best, taste psychologists. The smell chapter, you get the idea. One of the best, smell scientists or smell psychologists. So that's really cool. On the other hand, though, sometimes that makes it a little bit more technical than you might be hoping for, and that's okay. My hope is that what we're going to be doing this semester, and we'll get into this more in a little bit, but basically you'll read through this stuff and maybe it is a little bit technical at times. I'm going to be creating lecture videos so that basically you can watch those to kind of sum up everything that you read and reinterpret, all those technical details that we read about. So also you'll see here that I'm going to be working through the 5th edition. That's just because it is the newest edition. There are some differences between this and older versions, but honestly not that much. And so if you want to, feel free to check out the 4th version. The 4th edition, which I believe has it's like a field of flowers or something like that. But that should be okay. And yeah, if you decide to do that, you can get them really cheap on Amazon. The information, like I said, is mostly the same, but importantly, all the chapter orders are exactly the same, and so that is helpful too. A little bit about office hours. You can find more of these details in the syllabus, but basically, the best way to reach me is through email, just because I get it on my phone, and I am kind of addicted to my phone. I usually have it around, and so if I'm not meditating or whatever, I have it around and I can see whenever somebody's emailed me. And so that's the best way to do it. Unfortunately, I do not get Play-Doh announcements or messages on my phone, and that's no good, right? Because I think the university encourages us to use the Play-Doh messaging system, but unfortunately, I can't. I can't get those up. I can't get those notifications on my phone, and so I'm a little bit slower to respond to those. But if you email me, usually I can get back to you within 24 hours. And over the summer, honestly, it's way shorter than that. If you need to find my office, there are going to be some times throughout the semester that I'm going to be in my office, and so you can find it if you're familiar with Wilson Hall. This is what you're looking at right here. We have the computer cafe right here. I'm on the 1st floor, right across from the Play-Doh offices. You can find me in this little office here. For most of the semester, I'm going to be switching to the main office in a couple of weeks, so you might be able to find me there too. Okay, and I know I'm running long on time, so I'll try to make this quick. A lot of the stuff is going to be in your syllabus as well, but just to kind of vocalize these things and walk you through them, so that way you don't have to read them. Basically, we're going to have 4 different categories of assignments. We're going to have exams, quizzes, discussions, and research articles. And so this is the breakdown where the exams are worth 40%, quizzes worth a fifth, discussions worth a fifth, and the research articles worth a fifth of your grade. So I didn't want one thing to weight too heavily. So the exams, there's going to be 4 of them, and collectively they're 40%, which means that they are all, each of them are 10% of your grade. So when you think about it that way, it's not super stressful, right? It's only worth 10% of your grade. It's not, they're not meant to be super heavy in terms of their burden on your grade. These exams, they're going to go live on Friday mornings, and you'll have all weekend to complete them. Usually Friday morning, you can take it from then until Sunday before 11:59 p.m. And you have 90 minutes to complete them. They're going to be a mix of fill in the blank and short answer. If you've taken classes with me before, you know how these exams are formatted. But pretty straightforward, I think. For the short answer, I'm expecting kind of like a paragraph, not a page, just a paragraph per answer on those things. And the content that I'm going to be covering in the exam comes from everything. It's the textbook, it's the lecture videos, it's the readings that we do. It is the discussions that we participate in online. It's basically everything can be on these. But I do provide a study guide to let you know specifically what I'm looking for. The final exam is set to be cumulative. I'm still thinking about that. We'll see if it stays that way. Um, we'll see. Uh, the quizzes, these are all on Play-Doh, and you have an hour long to complete them once you open them up, and they are pretty much straight from the textbook. So they're straight from the textbook. It's just 12 multiple choice questions. You get your grade immediately, and those are all going to be due Sunday by the end of the day. The online discussions are also going to be due Sunday by the end of the day, and they are going to be usually they're going to have you do like some basic cognitive tests or basic perceptual tests. I like to try to make these a little bit more hands-on, so that way you can kind of, you're not like super bored or whatever. You're watching a video and responding to it, or you're, testing yourself for color blindness and things like that. And then you're writing, you're answering a couple of questions about that and responding to a classmate. There is a rubric that you can find online and on Play-Doh that walks you through exactly what you need to do in order to make a 100 on all of those. The research assignments, there isn't a final paper for this class like I have done in previous semesters. This time, what there's going to be is intermittent research assignments. So every week there's going to be a research article that you have to respond to. Not for the first week, but every subsequent week. And basically, it's going to be a highly technical, usually, research article that you read. And I'm going to have a couple of questions that I want you to answer for them. These are meant to challenge you, and that's because a lot of times in the quote-unquote real world, you're going to find things that are kind of challenging to read that are really technical, and these are good practice to take something that's really technical and try to boil it down into its take-home messages and communicate that with other people. Again, there's a rubric online where you can read more about that. I'm usually expecting these to be about 500 words, which is about 2 pages double spaced. And other details, if you have any kind of accommodations that you want me to know about, let me know as soon as you can. I'm super happy to work with you on those things. All of our assignments are open book and open web. Please don't do open neighbor. Sometimes it's very obvious, and I've busted people for that, and it's really embarrassing whenever people do exams together. And also my exams, they pull out of a bunch of different questions that I've written, and so you could take it next to somebody and get a completely different exam. So it's not always that helpful anyways. Plagiarism has been a problem with my online classes. I'm really cracking down on it even harder than I have last time. Especially on the short answers for exams and on the research articles, I'm just going to give a 0 if there's an unreferenced piece of information. If you, saw, if you just copy and pasted something, or if you just substituted a few words, if you just ran it through a thesaurus or something like that, I just don't, I can't, I'm speechless. You know what I mean? Like, it's something that I've been struggling with, and students keep doing it, and so I'm just getting tougher and tougher on it. And so if you are worried about that at all, and so just a quick aside, we're gonna talk more about this before the first exam. But if you're ever worried about that you might be plagiarizing, that what you're writing might be too close to what the authors wrote, wherever you're finding that information, it's always best to be upfront about it than to try to hide it. Because if you are worried about that and you let me know, then hey, I know that you're trying. I know that you're trying to be honest. I know that you're doing your best. If you don't disclose that information, then it looks like you are trying to cheat or something like that. So it's always best to be upfront about it. Always you can always reach me through email if you have any questions. All right, so for the first week, let's look very quickly at the first week. On Play-Doh, these you won't be able to see all of this because I've hidden some of it. But if you click on Start Here will give you the videos that you're watching and the rubrics. And Chapter 1 is going to be super simple for this. All it is a quiz and a discussion. And the discussion is going to be some very basic questions about yourself. And then there's a couple of videos that I've made for the first chapter. That's pretty much it. All of that stuff will be due Sunday before the end of the day. All right, so I know I've gone on too long, gone on longer than I hoped that I would, so I'm going to cut it there. I'm going to make another video walking you through how to use Play-Doh in case you've never used Play-Doh before. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'm super excited to work with you, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.